Okay, Kevin has started recording.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just pulling up the agenda.
Okay. Just to start, we have the training with OHA scheduled for December 20th. That was the time that most folks could make it. I had asked, when I met with him, I asked Kieran if they would be okay with us recording it, and they said they didn't think that'd be a problem. We still have to get the okay from Marty, who will be the co-presenter, but hopefully if folks can't be there on the 20th, they'll still have access to that. I'm going to meet with Marty and Kieran on Monday to review what we'd like them to cover in the training. There are two versions of the Real D SOGI collection instruments that they've developed. One is for practitioners, if you're a medical practitioner in an office collecting information on a patient. The other one is more along our lines for folks who are collecting and analyzing data on a more anonymous level, I guess, rather than, using it to work with one person, but using it to collect data on groups of people. So is there anything in particular that you would like to be sure that they cover? And just a reminder, this is the race, ethnicity, language, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity.
You were going to ask them for feedback on the demographic questions. Was that going to be part of the meeting, or were you going to contact them separately on that?
That was the original contact. And then they had offered to do a training for us rather than tell us what we needed to do to revise the questions, because that's not really their job, but they thought that they would offer the training as a way to help us decide if we wanted to revise the questions and how to best ask those questions, I guess.
I guess for me, which this is going to be as clear as mud possibly, so forgive me. But for me, it feels I'm most interested in learning. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is the 20th, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I won't be there. I apologize. I'm on vacation.
Good.
I'm very excited.
Not good that you won't be there, but good that you'll be on vacation.
I'm most interested, and this kind of just goes back to the conversations I remember us having, which is really based on any tools, ideas, things to weigh so that we balance inclusion with length. I don't know if there starts to be a harm caused when you have too many options, right? Like, so it's really balancing inclusion and accessibility with the potential harm either to the survey and people completing it, or the harm because people are just overwhelmed, plain and simple, with all the options. And that's around all the identities, and really, and also with that lens towards intersectionality, as we want to ensure that we are honoring intersectionality of people's identities as well, and creating space for people to own the multiple. Like, I want to just really be thoughtful of people with multiple racial identities, like, and ethnic identities. How are they making sure that we can really make sure people feel seen? Well, once again, honoring length and how that can cause harm.
Okay.
Clear as mud.
Yeah. I think that's something that they had really thought about, Caroline. One of the things that they asked that I thought was interesting is they give you the opportunity to list all of your racial ethnic identities. So you can select as many as you want. And then they say, is there one identity that you identify most with? So I thought that was really helpful because it does kind of get to that idea of intersectionality and personal identity. And then I think what you're speaking to, I also have some concerns about, and I'm hoping that they can help us think about how we can merge all of those categories together to get cell sizes that we can work with.
Yeah, I was like nodding and making as you were
Oh,
speaking. And I was like, I need to take myself off mic so you can hear me. Yes, that all sounds wonderful. So, and I thought that was on their radar already, but I felt like it was maybe helpful to just name again. So thank you.
I will also be on vacation at that time, but this is one of those questions that in my 25 going on 30 years total of being an academic, like the nut still isn't completely cracked or even close, really. So hearing from them about what the current best practice is, which is what I assume they would start with, I suspect is going to be the most useful. I would be not trying to dictate anything here, but I would be pretty content just saying, let's hear. I'd like to hear what they think is most important, just because that's probably what we would find most useful.
I should be able to attend. I have it down on, you said the 20th?
mm-hmm.
Let's see. Oregon Health Authority. I think I already have you down here. Yeah, I already have it down. So I should be able, I think I put it as a maybe, but I think my schedule is clear on that day because it's on a Friday just before the school closed down. I'm sure that this is going to be a ghost town. So I should be able to attend. I think I'm just like Carolyn. I think balancing all the options and honoring people's identity is most important because I don't want an extensive survey with 20 options. Um, Maybe have, I don't know, what are the core options and then have them to write in whatever they want to be identified as. And I don't know how to frame that, but I don't know. So just a balance of that without going overboard because I don't know. I don't know.
If you haven't had a chance to look at the instrument that they developed, I think it might be helpful to do that because I think, for example, for they ask, I'm trying to remember how they ask, but they ask something like, do you identify as and then they give a whole bunch of options within like a range, right? So for white folks, they might ask, do you identify as Middle Eastern, Hispanic, European origin, something like that. So but those are all, so you look for white and then you're like, oh, okay. And then these are within it. So you don't have to read through a list of like 40 different things. You just look for the white and then you look for the little subsection there. So and so it's thinking about that, especially for like folks who are Native American, right? Like you might be Crow, Delaware, Cherokee, but you also have grandparents who are Assiniboine. And so, all of those are part of your identity, but then asking, what do you,
primarily,
right, what do you primarily identify as? You might say Crow, right? So, I think that's that's why I like the way that they kind of structured it, because I felt like it was more useful. And by asking that question, people don't have to answer it, but it certainly helps when we're trying to aggregate data and make it usable. But yeah, if you have a chance to review that instrument ahead of time, and then maybe
on the in the email you said something like Oregon.gov OHA pages REALD standards, some kind of standards to approve.
If you go to that, you should be able to see it there.
Okay, then I will.
Okay, great. See, and I was trying to, I think, it's if you go to the event on your calendar too, the links are actually in there. It might be easier than trying to find one of my 1,000 emails that I keep sending you for poor people. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Okay. So I've got those notes. And I just wanted to real quick, I'm geeking out over because I just realized that there was a whole bunch of articles about the sexual experiences survey that was revised recently by Koss and her colleagues. So I had put a couple of documents in the in Basecamp. And I can't give you the articles themselves because they're copyrighted, but the articles from the special edition of the Journal of Sex Research are probably available to you through your university if you're more interested in exploring those. But I thought we might take not necessarily right now, but if we take a look at the sexual experiences survey victimization version, um, the new one, they ask about non-contact, what they call non-contact sexual violence, as well as cyber sex. And so a lot of what we're defining as sexual exploitation would be one or two of those things. So I thought we might look at lifting some of the language there. It's not copyrighted. We can do that. It's okay. And if anyone has any concerns, I was a student of Mary Koss, and I could email her and ask her if I don't think she'd have a problem just based on what we've done in the past. Obviously, we can't use any of the reliability and validity studies for if we don't do the whole thing, but I think it might be a useful way of framing it. And then I had also put in, because I thought it was really helpful, some of the knowledge that has been accrued on how to write questions for these kinds of surveys. So that document that I put in that has the excerpts, let me see if I can find it real quick. The importance of evaluating item phrasing through a comparative approach. If folks get a chance to read that, I think they might find it useful. They're talking about using behaviorally, I keep talking about using behaviorally descriptive, specific descriptions. This is where that comes from. And then they also have there's also some really interesting information on how things are phrased and the importance of being really specific. And then Kelly, you've brought this up a couple of times, I think, what order we ask the questions in and the impact that that's going to have on folks. And I assume that what we're aiming to do with the way we're structuring the survey is to maximize the number of respondents who have had the experiences, endorsing that they've had those experiences.
I would agree with that. Just, I mean, I think generally that order for something like this, because people are going to have different words and different descriptions, and maybe don't, as we talked about before, don't consider what happened to them to actually be one of the things that we're talking about. I think that the more you go specific to general, the more likely you are to get clearer information, because each specific question helps somebody think and remember about what happened to them, so that they are slightly, they move closer and closer and closer to a full understanding for themselves of what actually happened. So yes, agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, if we had enough time and large enough pilot groups, it would be lovely to be able to compare a couple different ways of ordering the questions, but I don't think we're going to be able to get into that level of detail, unfortunately.
We could just try our best to order it the best we can. Once we get all the questions, because that's pretty much, once you get the question together that that you have, that you want to ask, the next process is to look at the flow of the questions and how the structure of it, and let it flow. It has to like a smooth flow, one from the other to the other. So yeah, and it could be like pretty much like a research paper, the introduction, go from broad to specific.
Or possibly from specific to more general, I think Kelly was suggesting.
Yours is specific to more general. Okay. Okay.
It depends on the context. I think both things can be true. Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. I think that the overall survey, you always start out, as Ade is saying, you start out with general things that help people feel comfortable about what they're doing. But when the the draft that I shared with you a few days ago, Rowan, there were a couple of sections there where it just felt like a question like, do you feel, what's an example? Does your school do a good job of? And I think that's harder for people to answer truth. I mean, I think that's easy to answer if you don't think there's anything bad to say. So you just say, yes, they do a good job. But if you've had experiences that you have to think about, that's an instance in which I think you ask specific questions first so that people have had a chance to think more narrowly. And once they've been, sorry, once they've been, once they've thought about some specific things, they may still stick with their answer. Yes, they're doing a good job because I haven't experienced any of those things. But once you have those actively in your brain, you might say, oh, I should consider that. And so then it becomes a factor. So I actually think both things are true. It just depends on whether you're looking at narrow sections or broader sections. Like you would never lead off a survey with the most controversial question, right? And to Adea's point, like you want to start out with general broad things that people can answer easily and quickly. So I think
yeah, I wasn't talking. I think I see what you're talking about. You're talking about like within a certain context of like institutional response or something like that. Then the way the structure those within that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to this today. There were blocks of questions in that draft that I was looking at, and at least two of those, I think my conclusion was I thought that this general question would go better at the end because the previous 3 or 4 questions would have primed people's thinking to know what they really thought for the last one. There's a risk of bias there, of course, but if you don't ask misleading questions, if you just let people think about their own experience, I think that's a good strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, and I think when I wrote my campus climate survey, I asked about their experience and then I asked about their opinion about the school and things like that later on, institutional confidence and things like that. And that was like at the latter half after you've gone through your experiences and how you attributed those experiences and then what you thought about the institution and your experience your experience with the institution and then what you thought about the institution was kind of the last.
Well, I put the link to the document to the most recent version of the draft FGH in the chat there for y'all. At least I think that's what it is. And so, because that's the first one that was on the agenda, but we can certainly look at a different document if folks would prefer.
I have no preference either or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, let's go in whatever order you've got, Rowan. That's fine with me.
Okay, so let me go ahead and I'll share. So I've got FGH in there if you want to open it yourself, and then I'll go ahead and share so we can just kind of review it. And Adea, so that we could keep it to just one document, I put your comments into this document. This is the one, Caroline, that you had edited. And then Adea had made some additional comments. So again, FGH is about reporting. Who did they disclose to? What kind of referrals did they get? What kind of response did they get when they reported? And I have a whole thing about, so the way that I think about reporting versus disclosure, because reporting has been kind of I don't want to say tainted, but I think most people who are involved in anything Title IX think of reporting as making a formal report to the institution. And so I'm trying to go through and use the word disclosure for someone who's talking to someone without the intent of making a formal report. Does that make sense? So that's why that's why that differentiation in that first paragraph there. Okay, so and again, thinking about the order of these things, I think Kelly and Adea, I think you're best positioned to put them in the right order, but the statute says that we need to ask whether a student reported sexual misconduct, and then it requires us to always offer the opportunity to use not applicable and prefer not to answer. In a couple of these, I had used unsure, uncertain, and I think that's been a valuable option in some situations, but I don't know how you feel about that in general. And I don't know if we want to get into the weeds here on that. So this is, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I'm not sure I have anything to say. I was just trying to respond to your question, or implied question,
Yeah.
about are those okay? I think they are. Especially or rather, speaking particularly to uncertain or don't, that kind of. Anytime you have those, you're obviously risking inviting people to not be decisive. But I think in this instance, it feels particularly appropriate. Like, I think that, one of the guiding principles that we have been working with, I think either explicitly or implicitly, probably both, is just simply that the answers need to reflect the full range of realities of the people who are going to respond, will want to have available to them. And there's undoubtedly going to be some unsure uncertainty. And so it does feel to me like a perfectly valid response to include. And the surveys go through iterations. Maybe after a couple of years of using it, everybody will find that everyone answers unsure, uncertain, and we'll need to take it out to get, but I think sorry, I'm taking way too long to say yes. I think we should leave it in. It feels like a good idea to me.
Okay. And I like that too. I mean, sometimes it's nice to be able to sort of force someone to choose a specific response that makes it easier for analysis. But I think especially in the context of this survey, we want to try to avoid forcing anyone into saying something that they don't 100% endorse if possible.
Yeah. And I think actually to that point, Rowan, that makes me feel even more confident that we should. If people are going to actually be unsure or uncertain, my guess is that in this set of topics, if we don't offer that option, they'll be far more likely to go to no rather than yes. And that means that we're actually, building bias. Potentially, that would result in building bias into the instrument, which is thinking that there's things not happening when in fact something has happened to cause somebody to need to think about it, right? So I feel even more confident now with that thought in mind. So I'd say leave it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the statute wants us to ask for students who did not report sexual misconduct, why the student chose not to make a report. And so that's why I personally don't like questions that are phrased in the negative. I think that makes it, I think that creates a sense of bias, but in this sense, we kind of have to, unless someone can think of another way to phrase this. So, so if the answer is no, then, and then there's a little prefatory language. I pulled that. I can't remember which survey it was, but I liked it. There are many reasons someone might not tell anyone that they experienced sexual misconduct, and they are all valid. We are interested in learning why you decided not to tell anyone. Caroline separated those. I think that's a great idea. I think that makes sense because those are two very different things. I'm looking for, yeah. And then down here for students who did report, and again, this is a report, right? So this is to someone who is an obligate reporter at the institution, not just someone who's disclosing, who's talking to someone. So that, yeah, these are the non-confidential folks. And confidential too. Okay. And then Caroline had added both of those in, which I thought was really, really helpful. Are there any other like categories of people that I might have missed? Should we separate out non-confidential school employee into Title IX coordinator, campus employer, faculty member?
I was just looking at that, and I do think for clarity, might be helpful to remove the non-confidential piece and just list off some of those, like the standard positions, such as a faculty member, advisor,
Okay,
et cetera, et cetera.
okay.
Rowan, I'm looking at F2A.
Mhm.
I'm looking at my own copy of this, and the phrasing there. First of all, are we still on this one? I thought I hopped over to my own copy because I thought, is now an appropriate time to comment on this, or am I causing us to go somewhere we aren't?
No,
anymore?
we're right there.
That's okay. That's what I thought. Okay, so the question, as it's written there on the left, is: have you told anyone who works at your school about the sexual misconduct you experienced? That's a yes/no answer, but it's followed with please select all that apply. Like, given the list that's on the right, I think the right wording of this would be: who have you told among the people who work at your school, to whom have you reported the sexual misconduct experience, or something like that, right? So that, and I don't think that helps solve the problem of negative phrasing, because that's the next question anyway. But any objections to that? It's just one of those little things where I think people will understand it, but it creates some cognitive dissonance to have a question that feels like it's a yes/no answer, but then you get a whole bunch of options that you're supposed to choose from.
Okay.
Well, I agree. I'm also wondering though, if F2A was kind of the initial question, and then if you answer yes, then that's what pops up, because we do still need whatever the initial question is, which might be, have you told anyone?
Yeah.
And then the next one is what you just suggested.
Yeah. So I think this is the one. Did you tell anyone about the sexual misconduct you experienced? And then if yes, then you get this question. So, right. So who did you, and then, so this is actually two questions. So it would be, did you tell anyone? And I'm trying to keep it in simple, in more plain language. So
Yes.
help me with that. Did you tell anyone who works at your school?
Yes.
Okay. And then who did you tell? Right? Or did you tell, yeah, something like that. Did you tell anyone who works at your school? If yes, then. Okay. Does that help?
Cognitively, I think it makes a lot more sense. Yes.
I'm just wondering if it was really lined up. Rowan, would you mind going back up to the original F for the original question? Because the original question is, did you tell anyone about the sexual misconduct you experienced? Yes, no. And then I'm wondering, for simplicity, if we say, like, if you told anyone at your school, select the following. Like, I'm just curious. I feel like we're repeating the same question a little bit, is the reason I'm wondering if we've asked, did you tell anyone? And then if it's yes, then it goes to this. Please select from the list of possible, this isn't a super plain language, but do you all understand what I'm saying? Like, the idea that I feel like repeating the question. So is there a way we could just change it a little bit so we don't kind of repeat it again? I feel like myself, I would be like, wait, didn't I already answer that? So I'm a literal reader though, overly literal.
Well, my suggestion, I think, takes that to heart. Rowan, I would say take that simple question there, the straight F, and simply, okay. So then simply turn anyone into who and move it to the start. So did you tell anyone who works at your school? Yes, no. Who did you tell who works at your school? Check box option.
So how about, did you tell anyone about the sexual misconduct you experienced? Did you tell anyone who works at your school? Yes, no. And then yes, then you get the list of people. Who did you tell? Caroline, does that work, or does that still feel too repetitive to you? Okay. All right. Okay, so if we do that, so if they say yes, then we ask them these questions. And this, I still wonder if we want to, because they may not know what official means, like who's an official. So we could just put Title IX coordinators, student life or student, what else do we call student life?
Campus life, residence life, student life.
Student services, maybe?
Student services, student affairs. Uh,
Maybe that's one where that might be campus specific too, right?
yes, for sure.
We could have campus employer, we could have faculty member. You've got student staff or student leader here.
Do we ask, forgive me for not remembering this detail, but do we ask somewhere else if they've told any personal confidant, friend, family, or something like that? Because this question clearly is about people who work at the school.
Right. Yeah, we, let's see. Yeah, this is the next section. So that first section is all about people who work at the school. This one is about, have you told other people? And then that should probably be worded, have you told people not at your school? But then, this is repetitive. Have you told people who don't work at your school? But then that gets complicated because then you've got, maybe your friends or acquaintances worked there. Should this all just be in the same box then?
I know
Is
the line.
there- Oh, go ahead.
No, Lindsay, go for it. Thanks.
Is there a way to, thank you. Is there a way to sort of have like the core options, like, someone who worked at my school, it looks like there was like off-campus law enforcement, and then just have someone else, and then have drop downs between each that they click yes, and then they can click the option. So it's kind of encompassed in one section. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the only ones that really need the drop-down menus are these. And I'm wondering, did you tell any of these people?
Or is it like,
Sorry.
please choose all that apply?
Yeah. So let me get back. Okay, hang on. I'm gonna try this and let me know what you guys think of this. Because Caroline, when you put student staff in there, then that includes students. So did you tell any of these people about the sexual, who did you tell about the sexual misconduct you experienced? Please select all that apply. And then we could do a skip pattern to have like the Title IX coordinator, those kinds of questions. So that would include everybody. Did you, who did you tell? They don't have to answer two separate questions. It's just one question with a whole bunch of options.
I like that.
And then we could put the off-campus law enforcement in there too, and that gets rid of another question.
Do we want? Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
No, go ahead.
Do we care about differentiating between like an on-campus advocate versus like a community resource, like an advocate out in the community? Because not all schools have confidential advocates on campus, right? I guess how important is it to differentiate between the two?
I would
But
say
by
from
vir-
my, oh, sorry, Kelly.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I feel like from my perspective, I think it's okay not to differentiate. One, because for schools who don't have a confidential advocate, if someone selects them, they know who they're talking about then, or they know that it's not their school. And then there's too many other nuances to like, I was trying to tell myself like, what other story do we learn if someone chooses off campus versus campus advocate? And there's too many variances there to have a story. So I think I think what's important is that we uplift how common it is. Like that's the story I think that's worth telling, is how common it is to seek confidential advocacy. So I feel confident with it not differentiating.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm not going to regret that I don't know this, but won't every campus have at least one confidential advocate by virtue of having? So the fact that every campus has to have a Title IX coordinator doesn't mean they also have. Isn't the Title IX coordinator by definition a confidential advocate?
They are not confidential in any way, shape, or form. They have to keep the information private, but confidential is you can't disclose that information to anybody else. And so in Oregon, we have a status called Certified Confidential Advocate, and those people are legally prohibited from sharing information with anyone without the survivor's written permission.
And those would be healthcare, mental health care people.
They're advocates, and advocates
Oh,
are
I
not
see.
necessarily, so advocates often get a short end of the stick, and I just want to speak up for advocates right now. Advocates have one of the hardest jobs that there is because they're talking to people who are, they don't usually have a lot of authority. They're talking to people who have really, really emergent issues, who are definitely, usually in crisis. But advocate is a separate status. And in Oregon right now, you're required to do a 40-hour online training, which I have feelings about, but it's different than a counselor. A counselor might, and one of the specific differences is that a confidential advocate cannot share information about suicidality or other self-harm, whereas a counselor is probably required to by their licensure. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I'm not sure that information is as, I don't know that everybody knows what that means, right? Like, I don't know. And I wonder too, is it too broad to have advocate, counselor, and crisis line all in the same? I'm going to delete this.
It seems like it is to me. What I was going
Yeah.
to note a few minutes ago, the first thing I was going to note a few minutes ago,
Mhm.
while I was thinking along these same lines about consolidating it just into the question of who have you told and then check everyone. But the longer our list gets, the harder it becomes for somebody to actually do the question well, because it's a mental task to read every single one and ask yourself,
Mhm.
you don't read the list quickly. You have to read each one and ask, well, I mean, on the one hand, it seems like, well, you're going to know who you told. On the other hand, if you don't, to your point a moment ago, Rowan, like if you don't know what the label necessarily means, you're sitting there thinking, well, is this the person I told or is it not? Like, what if I don't see them there? So just something to think about. I don't know what the right answer here is, but we may want to do some organizing of these responses, even if it's only just visual organizing, like officials at your school and a list, friends and family and a list, or something that helps people just in small ways with the cognitive processing of who have I told, right? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Could the first question, what was the first question that introduced this where you had to say yes? Did it just say, did you tell someone?
Did you tell anyone about the sexual misconduct you experienced?
Could it be yes, comma, someone at my school? Yes, comma, da 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 da. And then what they get or what they see or how many questions they see next could be based on their skip logic based on what their response was. So at that initial question, yes, someone at my school, check all that apply or something like that. Yes, someone at my school. yes, a family member, yes, blah, blah, blah. I did, and then all the other options. And then based on that, you use skip logic to see, okay, well, who at your school did you tell? Well, what family member or close friend did you tell? Or, and then however many options there was, then we could do it that way. And they only see it based on their response to that first question. That's basically bringing you back to the way you had it before. Otherwise, I just fear if you have so many options, I just think fatigue for the eyes. You may, just by having so many options in one thing, you may skip over one because you wasn't reading too carefully and not that engaged in it. So I don't know. That's what I was thinking. I know how I am when I'm taking surveys. I may look at 4 or 5 options. When I have like 10 or 15 options or something that's long, I'm like, okay, come on. I won't keep scrolling. Okay, never mind. I just thought that. I just skip that.
No, Ade, I think it's a good idea. The one thing that's coming to mind for me is how to ensure that we do, if we go that route, how, if someone told someone at their school and someone in their personal life, how to make sure to just make that still clear for selection so something's not lost so that people can select both.
I believe you could program that in, even if you could program that in. I'm using in vivo. I don't know every school has that, but I believe based on the answer choices, someone said yes to this in that block. You can then say, go to this question next. So you could program whatever answer choices there is. Am I right? Who's ever done in vivo? Whatever answer choice someone said within a particular question, you can then have them to go to another question. Like I had someone to skip over a whole block because they said they never had harassment or experienced something in school. So why ask them harassment questions? So they skipped over a whole block of questions about their experience. So I don't know. It's just my thought. So you don't have to.
I guess where I'm a little, I understand what you're saying, and I think that, thinking about the user experience, and of course everybody processes stuff differently, but I'm afraid if we do something like I'm thinking about student staff or student leader, right? Maybe that person is a student leader and they're also my friend. So who then do I choose? So
If I was answering
right,
that question and that person is my friend and student
Mhm.
leader, I would, if the first block was a select all, then I would say friend and student worker or whatever, someone at my school. And then I would get both questions. I would get when it prompts because I don't know, this is what I don't, we would have to test it out. But if someone, because the person has 2 identities.
Mm-hmm.
So we would still prompt them because if they answer at my school, they'll get a at my school set of questions. If they answer friend, they'll get a friend set of questions. So that's kind of how you had it before, separate, but just have at the beginning, just have the yes to prompt you for the blocks for those 3 different choices or however choices you have. So whatever answer patterns that whatever answers they have.
I just wonder if that's maybe asking them more, if that's giving them more questions to answer.
Well, what you could do if for someone that said, I'm trying to think, how could we ask at the beginning so that because still based on their answer, you can give them a particular block. But how could we say, Could we ask them a follow-up question like, was this person an employee and a friend and a personal friend? Or do you
Yeah.
think that would be too much?
I think that would be too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
This feels like a good time to ask ourselves, and I don't know what the right answer is, but like, what is it that we want this question to tell us?
Mhm.
Which information is important and which information is not? That should be how we decide what we keep and how we organize it.
Yeah, I don't,
I think we're after a distinction between whether or not school officials or leaders who should be responsible for this, for responding to this kind of a report, whether or not they were informed.
Mhm.
We want to know if people didn't report it to anyone official, but did share it with someone so that they're not sitting on it, processing it all by themselves. And we want to know if they have not told anyone except the survey for the first time that they've ever said anything to anyone.
Mhm.
Something along those lines. No, aren't those our three objectives?
Mhm.
yes. So therefore, I don't care if the person was the friend and an employee. I just, yeah, so it could be separate for me. So separate things.
It could just be, did you tell anyone who works at the school? Or did you tell the Title IX coordinator? Right? Could be, those could
Okay.
be both. Did you tell family members? Did you tell friends?
The one caveat to that, and I'm not suggesting this, it's just a clarifying question. Do, right now, sorry, I'm second guessing. If we are simplifying, if we're not listing confidential advocate, like confidential campus advocate, and we're kind of, I don't know, let me pause, sorry. I had a question and then I realized that you all might have said something else. So, could you say, Rowan, that again, what you had just said?
Yeah, so maybe we've got too many options here. Maybe we don't need so many options. Maybe we could just say, who did you tell? Someone who works at your school? Family or friends? Someone off campus?
Yes,
Rowan, I
I
thought,
like that. Well, go ahead, Kelly.
no, go
'Cause
ahead, go ahead.
I was just saying, I like that. I still think Title IX off the coordinator is important than someone else on campus, or maybe just a few things like campus security guard or something like that, but just have a few categories for on campus, family, family of friends or something like that. And yeah, I think that's fine because I don't know if we care about what particular role, unless it's like a Title IX person or a campus police because they have to report it. Someone like that, someone that has to report it. But any other employee at the school, health person or something like that, I don't think we're gonna do anything with that information. Do you think so? I don't know.
Well,
Well,
one thought oh, sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
One thing that this question does make me think about in like providing certain education and training for folks who might be receiving more disclosures. So like I know like we've had some things where like responsible employees are not, sharing that they're responsible employees, or a student doesn't know, and that can like negatively impact their experiences. And so in terms of prevention, like, do we need to target trauma-informed trainings or certain workshops to certain groups across campus? Like, would this be able to give schools information on that? Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious on folks' thoughts. It's just something that kind of popped into my brain when thinking about like how this information could be used and like where survivors are sharing their stories.
Lindsay, I had a similar thought. Especially, so like at PCC, everyone is a responsible employee at this point with very small exceptions. So if we start to, when this is finally provided to students and students say, like a whole bunch of students say, yeah, they've been talking to staff about it, staff and faculty, but there's only been 3 Title IX reports, that tells us something pretty important. Or as you said, Lindsay, very much, it's a training opportunity. If we see if the college sees that the religious leader or clergy receives a lot of disclosures, but there hasn't been a specific outreach or training to them yet. Like, so I do think there's opportunities.
What if we, first of all, I didn't mean to suggest that we should definitely narrow it down to just those 3 responses. I don't think anybody quite took it that way, but that, Rowan, your response to that may be a useful. What if we, and at the risk of resetting here again, but what if we asked just 3 questions the way that you posited and then gave a couple of specific answers and then 1 general answer? So in other words, did you tell anyone at your school's, leadership or whatever the language is, and then you list the 2 or 3 people who you'd like to know if they told confidential advocate, Title IX coordinator, other. And then another question, have you told anyone in your family? And there it's probably just yes or no. And then have you told anyone you were close to? Again, probably yes or no. I mean, does that creates, I mean, it's not more questions, but it feels like more questions in a sense.
Can I take this and play around with it and maybe come up with like 3 different options?
I will say I like what you just said, Kelly. You mentioned like a 2 people that they could choose from, and then other as a write-in. So have the person to say who it is instead of listing all the possibilities. Just have the person just to say who they told, and then just say other and allow them to write that person in. And on the back end, whoever is the researcher with the data can say what that role is or what that person was. Or I don't know. That's what
Your request, Rowan, seems like a good idea to me. It would probably be helpful if we pulled these different trajectories into 2 or 3 options and then looked at them specifically without trying to imagine what they look like.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I feel like there's what I'm hearing in general, tell me if I've got it wrong or not, is Lindsay saying, what are we going to do with this information? Why do we need to ask all of, you're not saying this specifically, Lindsay, but why do we need all these options, right? Like, what are we going to do with this? So I think that, going back to that, what are we going to do with this? How do we want the schools to use this information? And, and your example of increasing training, I think is really important. And Kelly and Adea, you are trying to kind of simplify and minimize the number of things that people have to look at so that they're really only seeing the information that is important to them. So if they didn't tell, for example, and then I'm thinking a lot of this just doesn't need to even be in there. Some of it does. I think the made an anonymous report, I think it's really important to have that in there. And then I also honestly think that I shared this information online is important because that's the way a lot of people disclose. They just, they put a social media post out.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. So let me do that. Let me pull up, I'll try maybe 3 different options and send them out to you and let you kind of take a look at them. We have another meeting on the 17th. I think we can come back to this one. Okay. I think this formal report question is, I think we really need to know if they made a formal report. And I think that's so confusing that I don't think it's a useful option.
Well, I think we do need to know that. What do you think is confusing about it? Or did you, yeah, I think a formal report, because you were asked questions about how the school handled your report, right?
Caroline, you might have had different experience. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have some thoughts. I almost started typing in the chat. I have 2 thoughts, so I'm trying not to lose one. And the reason why I think it's confusing is, one, because our Title IX coordinator doesn't like using language like formal report. So I think that for folks who are not like in that realm of conversations or what have you. Formal report doesn't always mean much to them. What does that mean? So I was wondering if we reworded it to say, did you disclose or did you report, whatever that language you want to use, this to someone at your school so that they would start an investigation, ask the person to stop their behavior. Like we talk about we're talking about informal resolution so much because of the nature of what's being reported at our community college. Oftentimes students just want the other student, if it's sexual harassment, for example, just to be left alone. Or if they're starting to show stalking or they are doing stalking behaviors, I just want you to tell them to stop. So I'm wondering if we can put that in really nice plain language, some examples of that.
How about, did you tell someone at your school with the expectation that it would initiate an investigation, it would, et cetera, whatever?
Mhm.
I mean, the problem with that is it possible that someone initiated a report without any expectations, right? Like when you put a loaded word in, like with the expectation, it may not hold up, but it
Yeah.
seems that well, anyway.
Yeah.
Well, it makes me think even of an anonymous report, right? Like this might be too vague, but even the idea of, did you make a report so that someone at the school would have this information or would do something with this information? Like that's very vague, and some people be like, but do what? But I think, how often is it? I wanted someone to know. I wanted them to do something about it. I didn't know what the outcome might be. I didn't have expectations, but I needed to let someone know because I wanted it to stop.
I like that. I like.
So, Caroline, I know that there's a lot of reasons that someone might have made a report so that it would be documented, so that if there were other people that, that this was happening to, they would know they weren't the only one. Because I think the person should be held accountable. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons.
Uh-huh.
And Kelly, I keep taking your language and removing syllables from it. I'm so sorry.
That's good survey design, Rowan. Remove as much as you can, and no need to apologize for that.
Yeah, no, it's just you're making such good points, and I know we can lose nuance that way too. But
spare my feelings. It's all good. Or don't
okay.
spare my feelings. It's all good. No need to worry about that.
Or take some other action. We could just have a why did you tell? And then it could just be, what were you hoping, or, why did you share the information? Is that that feels really confrontative though.
I mean, if it's open and not open-ended, but if it's like a statement and then like options, it could be, did you tell someone for the purpose of ... and then investigation, access to support measures, documentation, something like that.
So I find myself wondering why we aren't just stopping at, did you tell someone at your school? If we put 3 modifiers in a row but don't ask them to indicate what they are, they don't need to be there. Like, we're not learning anything about them. We're just sort of suggesting how they would think about it. Like, this brings me back to, what do we want the question to tell us? Do we simply want to know whether or not someone with the power to do something was told or not? In which case, let's make it very simple. Or do we actually want to know who? If we ask people to think about what their motive was, that has the potential to be a fairly large emotional task that they may not want to do. And I don't mean that it would sort of do any harm. It just means that they might get frustrated with the survey and stop taking it. It's like, what difference does it make why I did it? I just did it because I thought somebody would respond, right? Something like that. So what I'm asking is, do we want that information? If so, we should ask for it. If we don't want that information, we should just simply keep the question as simple as we can. Did you tell someone?
Mhm.
And if we care why, then we should ask those as a series of what were your reasons for telling someone?
Mhm. Yeah, because we don't have to ask this question at all. Is that valuable information? If we get that information, the schools do something with it? Will it, is it educational to know the answers to those questions?
Yeah.
So,
I
I mean,
think it's,
schools, go ahead.
oh, sorry, Kelly.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think it's really helpful, and this is something that in theory, a Title IX coordinator should be able to run their own reports on their data if the information got to a Title IX coordinator and say exactly how many students asked for an investigation. So the school should have this data already without a student answering it. Also, students might think they asked for something they didn't ask for, and it skews the data. Do you know what I mean? Like, not, I mean, or we don't have enough data to know. So I say that in the sense that I do think that there's important information there. I also think that schools should already have this data if they run the reports well, whatever system they're gathering data on. Isn't this essentially what's in the survey, not the survey, but what the schools just had to answer, Rowan? Didn't we essentially answer this question? Like how many students sought?
yeah, how many students made a report?
Mhm.
How many students asked for supportive measures? How many supportive measures did you grant?
Mhm.
How many investigations did you conduct? How many people were found responsible for, how many people were found not responsible?
Yeah.
Um,
So, I mean, the other thing we would get from this is if what schools are reporting and what this information is very off, that's important. It tells us that um, there's, in the very least, there's misunderstanding on how to ask for students to really ask for what they want, or the
mhm.
online coordinator understanding. So, but still, I feel like we're making guesses a little bit, and I'm not. I don't know. That doesn't seem like.
Mhm. So,
Kelly, what were you about to say?
I don't recall, but I'm sure that it was not urgent or consequential. Thank you for asking.
so, okay, so if we ask the question in this way, did you tell someone so that they would start an investigation, ask the other person to stop, document the misconduct, or take some other action? What we're asking there is, did you tell them so they would do something? So that's what that question is.
I would say then if we want that information and we think it's useful, then we should ask the question in the form of somewhere along the way, did you tell anyone? If yes, by telling someone, did you expect an investigation? Yes or no? And whatever the different options that we'd want to put in there are. I'm just really, I'm concerned about writing a question that has the answer categories in the question, but then we don't measure them in the answer, right? So putting those, being that specific in the question, especially when those are three different things, an investigation, a confrontation with the person that says, don't do this again, or some other action. Well, what if it's a fourth that they think was important, but we don't list? Now are they going to say no? Or, I mean, so I guess I think that this one, in part because we're talking about it so much and having a hard time figuring out exactly what we want it to look like, I think we should simplify the question And if we think the other information is important, we should ask to measure it, or we should ask for it so that we measure it. Otherwise, we should just keep the question simple. But
Well, I would, and then in addition to that, I'm wondering if anyone else has thoughts around if we should just remove this question. And what if we, and if we really do believe we're getting something that is usable for schools.
I'd be fine removing it. But I also don't understand, I'm not in the parts of campus that may do something with that information. We are already asking it in that previous question that Rowan is going to mock up some different versions of. At least we're asking the first half, which is, did you report? And then, so this one, I guess thinking of it that way makes it just underscores for me that what we really want to know is, why did you do this? And if we want to know that, we should ask why. If not, we should take it out. I'd be fine taking it out. I think it's going to be hard psychologically for people to know why they reported. I mean, you know, one reason why some people report is because they felt it was the right thing to do. I didn't really know what would happen next. I mean, lots of people don't report for the same reason, right? Like, so I don't know. I guess I would lean toward taking it out unless people feel strongly that there's important information there, in which case we should isolate that important information and ask for it explicitly, not guess at it with the way we write the question.
I would like to see, so I think the reason that I'm trying to figure out, why do I think this question is important? And because I really want us to have some questions that sort of start to get at that concept of institutional betrayal. I told the school they were supposed to help me, they didn't do anything, right? Asking this question gives you the first part of that. Did you want them to do something? But it doesn't give you the second part. Do you feel like they did what you wanted them to do? And that's really what we're interested in, right? Did the school protect? Do you feel the school protected you from retaliation? Do you feel the school handled the matter sensitively, right? So yeah, so I think taking this out makes sense. Oops.
I'm wondering.
Rowan,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I'll just hop in very quickly. Then let's ask what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
said you reported. Did you report expecting the school to respond? Did they respond?
Mm-hmm.
That's, I mean, because what you just expressed, I think, would be extremely useful to schools, and we can ask it in an explicit way that's easy for students to understand.
Yeah, and I think this H is, the next section sort of gets into that, these next questions. But it doesn't specifically do what I just said. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we do need a question that is, let's see if I can get this in here. Oops. Oops, sorry. So basically, did you want them to do something? Did they do it? Right. And then with H, so, okay. All right, sorry, going back up. Okay, so G, I think we're good on G. G is the question about who did they disclose to? Friend, family member, peer, faculty, non-faculty staff. Okay, so we got that question. Then H says, when a student reported sexual misconduct, were they informed or referred to local, state, campus, or other resources, or to victim support services, including but not limited to appropriate medical care, mental health counseling, and legal services? So I think we still need to develop that question. And then this question, we have to ask, did they give you information about resources, including medical care, mental health counseling, and legal services? And here I split all of the options into on-campus and off-campus because there's so many freaking options, and I thought visually that would be a little bit easier. But I don't know what you think. So we have to ask this question. Did you get information or did you get a referral? Is that the best way to ask that question?
I'm concerned about how many response options there are.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean,
So local, state, campus, or other resources. Appropriate medical care, mental health counseling, and legal services. That's what we have to ask about. It's a lot of options, but I feel like they're all really different from each other.
a minor detail, but while I'm thinking about it, the second option there, on-campus crisis services or mental health helpline versus the next one, on-campus mental health counseling. I don't think the word mental health should appear in successive answers. I mean, could we just go with on-campus crisis service and cut or mental health helpline?
Mhm.
Just so that it doesn't,
Mhm.
it's already like this is my mantra, how much psychological
Mhm.
energies it take to answer each of these questions. Like this one's already going to take a lot of psychological energy.
Mhm.
I mean, I understand what you mean, I think, from my
Mhm.
experience working on campuses, but I think having mental health appear twice in successive answers is confusing.
Yeah, I think we can just remove that. Yeah.
Thank you.
We could just have on-campus counseling
We
it
are
says
here.
mental health counseling. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I do think we need to
Oh.
keep mental health counseling. I'll note
Yeah,
that.
I'm not
Mhm.
advocating taking the
Okay.
phrase out, just not having it appear
Yeah.
successively in two consecutive answers, or even in any two answers. So I think
Mhm.
it's fine there. I think you could have left the crisis service too, if you want to. I just didn't. I was just saying I don't think that mental health helpline adds anything that crisis service doesn't already convey.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's necessary looking at it. I think there's probably, I don't know, you guys probably know better than
Yeah.
I do, but how many students actually use crisis lines, campus crisis lines?
There are a couple schools that have them though, like
Yeah.
OHSU has them, and
Mhm.
yeah, there's a few schools with them.
Willamette does.
Yeah. I have a question though. So when we think about the phrasing, did the person you told give you information about on-campus or on-campus or off-campus resources? Is that a yes, no answer? And then it pops up. What does this look like in practice when they come across the question? I also feel, does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel like it should be more something like about any of these. And the reason that I think it's important to list them out rather than just have it a yes, no question is because it's kind of a memory jog, right? So
And does it make sense to just have any of these resources and then have a list
yes,
on campus and then just, okay.
yeah.
Awesome.
And this could be under a heading that says on campus, and then, we don't have to have on campus in every one of those options. But
I mean, ideally, the interface on this would look like a list of the topics that you would check, and then next to that would be on campus, off campus, and you would check that too, so that it visually doesn't appear twice as a list, right? But I mean, obviously, each school is going to build this their own way, so using their own delivery mechanism system. I mean, the alternative form of the question would just be, which of the following resources did the person you told, were you given by the person you told? And since one of them is none, then it becomes the inclusive set of responses. But The way it was, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I think, the way.
The other thing is, did the person you told, right? Like, who are we talking? Who is the person you told, right? Like, and maybe you told 7 people, and, when you told someone, did you receive information about these resources? But then it's asking specifically about for a student who reported sexual misconduct. So this is going to have to be.
I feel like it needs to follow the, did you tell them at your school?
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, I have to jump off a couple of minutes early to get my daughter for school. So I'm just gonna
Okay.
pop out about 4 minutes or so.
Okay. So this is really only for people who told someone at the school, then they'll get this. Because that's what we're asking is when you reported the sexual misconduct, and here they're using that, not disclose. They're using the word report. They use the word disclose in other places in the legislation. Here they're using report. So, and I think, Kelly, the reason I don't want to ask, and Adea, the reason I don't want to ask specifically, did you make a formal report, is that most of the time they don't know if they did or not. They thought they
Right.
did, or they went to the Title IX coordinator because they wanted help and they didn't realize they were making a formal report.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Sorry, the cats are bothering her. They're up to something. They're definitely up to something. Okay. All right. And then I put this in, were you able to use the resources you were offered? I don't know that that's helpful.
Well, I was looking at that question
Yeah.
while it was up there, and I mean, use versus able to access, those would be 2 fundamentally different things, right? And so I would first ask, well, what's the intent? Do we want to know if I mean, tried, accessed, able to use, 3 different things. So what do we want to know here?
Yeah. Along with that, I'm not sure how schools will be able to use it in a meaningful way, the response. I understand why we ask, it makes sense, and I just don't know if schools will be able to use it.
Yeah.
And sort of to me, the first threshold would be, did you try to use any of them? Because if somebody says no, that has a lot more meaning than if somebody says yes. Then you want to know them. Then these other things that become harder to use. So if there is a desire to know something there, I would think it would be that. Like, did people actually try to use? But even then, it's like, well,
Yeah.
welcome to survey writing.
Yeah, I know. We don't have to ask it. Let's not. So this one, did you receive what the question, and I want to acknowledge too, it is 2:24 and we are done here at 2:30, right? Okay. So maybe we'll just pause here and come back to it. Does that sound okay? Why don't I play around with this some more and then send it to you, thinking about it? Just pointing out, like this, I don't think this is useful. We'll scratch that. But we do need to ask, did they receive information? Were they provided with protection from retaliation, access to institution-based supportive measures, or institution-based accommodations, and criminal justice? So did you receive information about your rights and options? That's where these particular options are coming from. So I think we have to ask that one in that way to get the statute.
Would it be, I mean, this could easily cut both ways, but should one of the response options be there? Yes, but I don't remember which one it was. I mean,
Mhm.
it feels like those are some pretty narrow and specialized things that people might have a really hard time drawing a distinction between, and they may not remember what they were told. They may not have understood what they were being told. So maybe, yeah, that's something like that.
Because we have to have not applicable and prefer not to answer in every single one.
Mm-hmm.
And we could just say, did you receive information about any of the following about
Yeah.
okay. And then these are not necessary. I don't think. Yeah, these are not necessary. So maybe we can just scratch that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then this, I think we bopped up at the top. And Adea had a whole bunch of other questions, which are good questions. So yeah. Okay, I feel like we're pretty much done with this one, at least for right now. And I'll go ahead and, like I said, draft up a different version and send it out. Sound good? Okay.
Yep.
Right.
It's good to me.
Okay.
So we're meeting again on the 17th, you said?
I think, Kevin, is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I am definitely available. I will be there.
Okay. All right. Let's see if we can get a little further. I am really hopeful that we will have a pretty decent draft available for the council to take a look at in January and then to approve in February so that we can start the pilot. I'm really hopeful that we can get there. I think we can. It's gonna take some more work, but so if you have an opportunity to go through, especially hammering out those questions in A, B, C, D, and I think it'll be really helpful. But
Okay, I'll work at it. I'll look at it. Thank you.
thank you. Lindsay, do you think you have time to look at that section on, oh, I can't remember which section you were on the I think of the effects, was that the one?
I do need to excuse myself
Yeah.
to get something else done that I have an end of day deadline for. So
Okay.
I'm going to.
All right. Adele,
Ron, thank you for all your hard work on this. I
Sure.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
everyone have a nice weekend.
You too.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks. Rowan, sorry, what were you, which section were you asking about?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to there was a section on I think I had asked about the impacts. So that would be like MNOP.
Uh, I found it. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I can definitely take a look at it and So downloading, adding comments, re-uploading, right? I'm
Yes.
chronically afraid of messing it up.
You
so-
can't mess it up. Basecamp keeps all of the previous versions. So just, yeah.
Okay, great.
So yeah, download it, add your initials and the date that you're working on it, and replace the existing document with it.
Awesome. And then you said next meeting's on the 17th, so before then.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Awesome. I can do that. I'm putting it on my calendar so I know that I'm doing it too.
Okay. I
Awesome.
appreciate
Thank
you so much. Thank you, Lindsay.
Oh, thank you. No, and thanks for all your work on this. I know there's so much going on behind the scenes, and all your like willingness to just prepare different options and adapt. And I don't know. I just really appreciate you. I know it's a lot of work, so thank you.
Thank you. All right.
So
Take
well,
care.
I will. You too. I'll see y'all soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.